Today's tutorial is classic Shayda, a mammoth watercolor leaf practice that will have you feeling confident and painting pretty. Hey friends, what's up? Welcome. My name is Shayda Campbell, and on this channel we get creative together. Today's video is a wonderful watercolor leaf practice. I'm going to take you through how I paint leaves in a really natural and fluid way. And if you want a little extra help with today's video, there's a worksheet. Head over to my Patreon and sign up. It's only $3 a month or $33 for the entire year. And here's some big news. If subscriptions aren't your thing, you can now shop individual worksheets in my Patreon storefront. Head to patreon.com/Shayda Campbell to check it out right now. So I have a lot of watercolor leaf tutorials on this channel, but this is the type of stuff I still get so many requests for, and I understand because leaves and flowers make great practice and you want them to look natural and organic. So grab your supplies. I'm using Arches cold press paper on a block. I have my whole jar of watercolor paintbrushes here, and we're going to use a bunch of them. And then I have my favorite set of watercolor paint pans. Now, all of the supplies are linked in the description, so you can shop those links, support this channel, and get the exact same stuff if you want. Now, I'm beginning by wetting the cakes of paint. I am wetting the indigo, the gray green, the sap green, the deep phthalo green, as well as brown and red. I like to mix blues, browns, and reds, even violets, into my greens. But this is not a color mixing tutorial. I do have a great one all about mixing greens, and I'll link it in the description. Today, though, we're just going to focus on our brushwork. So starting with a large round brush, we're going to paint a leaf with 2 brush strokes. So add some pressure to that brush, pull the belly of the brush across the paper, and with those 2 brush strokes, you've created a leaf shape. Let's do another one. 1, 2. That time I sort of went out and then back towards me. And then I used the tip, that nice pointed, delicate tip of the round brush, to do things like refining the shape of the leaf, adding stems and branches, any finer work. That's the beauty of the round brush. You have this large belly that holds all the paint, and you can add pressure and do quite a large shape. And then you can use that tip of the brush to come back in with maybe a darker color, release a spot or 2 of darker pigment, or maybe do some thin little veining lines. Now I'm working a little wet into wet here, which means my pigment is still wet, and when I add more, it's going to blend and blur. And when you're painting organic forms, that's really nice. The paint is doing some of the work for you. It shades everything in a really natural, loose, fluid way. Okay, let's keep practicing the same thing, but this time we're going to pick up a little sap green, and we're going to do a slightly different leaf shape. So you can still use 2 brush strokes, or maybe even 3, but we're going to paint a thinner, longer leaf. So run that belly of the brush across the paper. 2 or 3 brush strokes is all it should take. Don't go back over it again and again. Don't overwork the paint. And you just want these nice, loose movements, and you'll get these beautiful organic shapes that are perfectly imperfect. That might be a little weird. You don't want all your leaves to look the exact same. You want them to be different. Not getting enough Shayda content? Well, I release a bonus video every single month over on my Patreon. Sign up and become part of the community to watch this watercolor tree tutorial just in time for autumn, and get immediate access to the many, many other bonus videos. It's all waiting for you at patreon.com/Shayda Campbell. Let's try another one together. This is kind of like an oak leaf, and I just use the round brush, and you just run that belly of the brush across the page to form this larger shape. So 2 or 3 motions there. It's like you're painting a bunch of little leaves, but they're all connected to make one larger form, and then you can add a little bit of a stem. Release a little bit of darker pigment, work that wet into wet, let the paint do the work for you. And just keep in mind, they should look a little weird and perfectly imperfect. Now let's grab a different brush. I'm going to reach for my Filbert, and I want to try like a smaller leaf design. And the Filbert is great because it has this rounded brush head, but it's also very flat when you turn it to the side. So you can do very thin, fine lines, and you can get these very nice petal and leaf shapes with your Filbert. So I'm just slapping that brush against the paper, allowing these funny little rounded shapes to form on the page. And then I come back in and I turn the brush on an angle and I do these thin little lines. Now the lines can act as stems and branches, but they can also act as leaves that might be on a bit of an angle. Basically, I'm just doing a cluster of both shapes that this brush naturally makes, and it gives the most wonderful natural cluster of little leaves. I finished it up by adding a little bit of darker pigment, mostly doing some thinner lines and brush marks, and that's that. Okay, so next let's continue using our small filbert brush here, but we're going to do a larger leaf. So I'm pulling that brush across the paper. 2 or 3 brush strokes should be all you need to get a large leaf shape. 1, 2, 3, okay, 4. And then we'll just add a couple more here, a couple more large leaves. A lot of them are touching, which I like. And then we'll turn that brush on a bit of an angle, get that thinner line, and we'll just make it look like there's a few stems and branches there. Okay, let's reach for our little filbert brush once again. I've got a mix of sap green and Naples yellow here. It gives me a beautiful lime green, and we are just going to make the thinnest little leaves, and I'm challenging myself to make a leaf using a single brush stroke this time. So just 1 brush stroke per leaf. See what sort of shape you get. They do not have to be perfect. In fact, if they're too perfect, if they're all too similar or things are too symmetrical, it won't look natural. It will look weird. And I really have to fight the urge to make things symmetrical because I always want to, make it perfect, and it doesn't really look perfect. It looks weird because nothing in nature is perfect. Anyway, I grabbed a little bit of darker pigment, switched back to a round brush here, and I am just doing some very messy veining lines on some of these leaves that have begun to dry. I'm working more of a wet on dry technique now, which means I can be a lot more precise and I'm not getting that blending and blurring that I did with the wet into wet. If you're like, what are you talking about, wet on dry, wet into wet? I do have a watercolor e-course for the absolute beginner. I will link it in the video description. It's on my website and it's available right now at an excellent price. For the remainder of these leaves, I've switched back to a round brush, only it's a smaller size, so a number 4 round. Before I was using a number 10. And I've mixed a beautiful green. This is a sap green with a whole lot of red in it. And I'm trying to do leaves that are made of 1 or 2 brush strokes. And between the 2 brush strokes, I am trying to leave a little line of negative space. So in watercolor, you often use the page beneath, the white of the page, to help create detail, whether it's the space between petals or the veining line in the center of a leaf. That white page can help create details that are otherwise tricky to capture. And with that said, for this particular leaf, I'm just thinking perfectly imperfect. I don't want a lot of symmetry, want them all to be a little bit different shape, different size. So there you have it. Okay, let's do another one with this smaller round brush. Now I want to try something that's really delicate, and this one is fun to paint, and it's wonderful brushwork practice. You are going to use just the tip of that brush to paint the thinnest, the tiniest, the most delicate of little branches. Sometimes when I'm painting like this, my brush won't even touch the page because I'm going so light that I'll actually miss little spots, and that's okay. So then once you've got that delicate curving branch, it's just barely there, you come back in and you just kind of do a little wisp of a leaf, just a tiny bit of pressure on the tip of that brush, kind of slap it against the page ever so gently, and you'll get these funny itty bitty little leaf shapes, and you can paint this in a cluster and it looks so pretty. And if you're doing a larger watercolor floral, adding a few of these, it just gives the piece such a beautiful intricacy and delicacy. All right, for the last one, I'm picking up a little bit of sap green on my small round brush, and I want to do a small oval-shaped leaf that has a bit of a toothy, raggedy edge. And to do that, I'm sort of wiggling the brush as I work out the form of the leaf. You can see here, I actually shake the brush a little bit, and it makes for a leaf that looks like it has that toothy edge. So these, again, are fun to paint. They're gonna take a few more brush strokes than some of the others. But you can also paint them simply by doing that 1-2 approach, and then using the tip of the brush to kind of push the paint outward to create the look of teeth. I also came back in with darker pigment and did some messy veining lines, just like I did on some of the other leaves that we practiced. And then speaking of darker pigment, now that things are dry and we can really be precise, we can add some really thin, delicate lines down the center of some of the leaves, or just some green, darker splotches, if you like. That's all it really takes to create a look of depth and detail. Well, that could have easily been the end of the video, but not today, my friends. Just because I love you, we're going to keep on going with our practice, and we're going to create some of these same leaf shapes, but in some more autumny colors, because I love fall. It is the best season after all. So mix up a few colors like yellow ochre or raw sienna, something like a light red, red-brown looks beautiful, and you can blend all of those together and just see what you come up with. And then we're going to use the same brushes. I'm reaching for my number 10 round to start with here, and we're going to paint some of the same leaf shapes and just keep on practicing. So the leaves are all about brushwork, and brushwork takes time to learn and to get comfortable with. The more you do it, the more your movements are going to be effortless and relaxed because your body knows those motions, and the more the petals and leaves and whatever else you paint, the more those forms are going to look effortless and relaxed. And so as we paint today, the second project and the first one, just focus on painting the leaves with these confident yet relaxed, fluid motions, and that is going to show up in your painting. Now I am going to add another leaf shape here, a little kind of maple leaf-esque leaf, and I do this by doing a stem first and then one leaf shape there on the end, and then two more little leaf shapes, one on the left, one on the right, and then two more little leaf shapes at the bottom. So it's sort of like 5 ovals, 3 large ones and 2 small ones, and then you use the tip of the brush to kind of just push the paint outward, making the ends of the ovals a little more jagged, a little more raggedy. Another thing I want you to think about as we move through our practice piece is watercolor timing. Yeah, timing is a big thing when it comes to watercolor painting because you're always thinking about how wet is my pigment? Is it still puddle wet? Is it lightly wet? Or is it dry? So when things are puddle wet, that may not be a great time to release more pigment because the pigment will move so much. But as it becomes lightly wet, you want to release a little bit of darker color or another color because you'll be able to create some, say, veining lines, but they will blend and blur, which gives a nice organic look. Now, if things are totally dry, that's good too, because the paint that you put on top, you can be very, very precise with it. So you can continue to layer and layer and layer as much as you want and add more and more detail and depth. As you work through leaf after leaf, page after page in your sketchbook, because you know you want to paint a lot to get comfortable, think about using different brushes. Think about trying out different shapes and sizes of leaves. But the most important thing is focusing on your brushwork. Think about how you move that brush and try to paint leaves using a minimum of brush strokes. Then use the tip of the brush to come back in and change and refine the shape. Now, I like to also think about painting leaves on different angles. So there's my kind of messy oak leaf. And then if I were going to angle it, I would do sort of half of it with just the barely there rounded edge to show that, you know, there is more to it, but that it's sort of blowing in the wind. I hope that makes sense. This is a long video and I'm trying to strike a balance here between like peppy and fun, but also very informative. I don't know how it's going. Anywho, let's do a little more wet on dry. So these leaves are drying. We're adding some very thin, delicate little veining lines. If the leaf is still a bit wet, those lines might blur, and that's okay too. Sometimes I just like to add a splotch or two of darker pigment, and that adds a beautiful depth. And from there, my friends, I think that is pretty much all I want to say. The most important thing you can take away from this is just to not worry about wasting paper. You know, the paper is there for you to paint, to practice on, and just paint a whole lot of leaves. So start by just filling in this entire page, go over top of the ones you don't like and try it again, and have fun. painting leaves is just this very relaxing, peaceful process. Fall is upon us. Light a candle, make that cup of tea, sit by the window, and have an hour of creative me time. It's just about you and your good mental health. Friends, that brings us to the end of today's practice. Okay, maybe I had a little more wet on dry, a few more details to add, but no, I'm all done. Leaves are something that I go back to again and again when I just want to relax and practice my brushwork. And I hope that you'll enjoy today's practice, that you'll really enjoy the process of practicing, even if the outcome isn't exactly what you pictured. Thank you for watching. Head over to Patreon to get that worksheet if you need a little extra guidance. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. I'll see you soon with a new tutorial.